Hey everyone, my name is Patrick with Denial Racing and Performance. In today's video, we're going to be talking about internal spool assist valves and external dump valves. All right, so we're working with a Turbo 400 transmission. The easiest thing to explain, the most commonly used transmission is a 3-speed and a 2-speed in drag racing. Okay, we'll start off with an external dump valve. This is a very common modification that some of these turbo cars are using. Street, track, grudge, no time stuff. Again, we're talking 800 horsepower to 1500 horsepower range. Most common thing is a single stage external dump valve. Okay. Typically, they would be mounted on with a bracket, or they are an all-in-one piece, billet piece made by several aftermarket manufacturers. Whether they're replacing the governor cover with this modified manifold adapter piece, or you just have a simple bracket with the Hydroforce kind of one-way solenoid manifold block. Okay. What they're doing is we have two ports up here, your to cooler and from cooler, okay, in a conventional circuit. All right, so the bottom port is actually the exhaust of the converter to send that very hot fluid. Again, keep in mind, the converter makes up about 90% of your trans temperatures, okay? What we're doing is we're taking that really hot exhaust fluid, about 600 degrees in some cases, and we're sending it to a cooler. Well, here, what we're doing is we're putting a T in. If we're utilizing an external dump valve, we're putting a T in. All right, so from that T, we're going to the external dump valve solenoid and then also to the cooler circuit, all right, to the actual cooler itself. When activated, we're creating a hydraulic leak. What that does is, instead of allowing it to go through the entire cooling circuit, we're bypassing that, causing a hydraulic leak to that solenoid. Once that solenoid is now open, goes from normally closed to open, it is then sending that fluid right into the pan. I'm not a crazy fan about that, just because of the high temperatures. You're now increasing your pan temperature. Okay, and you could see that if you have a temperature sensor in your pan, so keep an eye on that too. But from there, what it's doing is actually starving this top port. Now, if you don't understand how these work, this top port is the return from the traditional cooler circuit. However, it's not just done there. It doesn't just go to that port and then go back into the pan. It has a very vital role in keeping this transmission alive. So that fluid conventionally coming back after being cooled from, like I said, a conventional system, coming back from the cooler, it goes to here. Now we look at the front of the transmission here without a converter on it. We have our input shaft here, and we have our stator support tube. And then we have our pump here. The pump, how it's designed, is in between the casting of the pump and the stator tube is some voids. Okay, there's a lot more that goes on there, but we're just gonna stick with this return circuit. In those voids, what it allows it to do is send the fluid back and allows it to lubricate the entire center line of this transmission. All right, so it goes through there, through the back of the pump, into the forward drum. And from there, what it's doing is going through the shaft. So you'll see like a hole in your intermediate shaft. What that's doing is carrying cooled fluid all the way through, lubricating your thrust washers, your thrust bearings, your bushings, okay, your gear train. It's lubricating the majority of these, well, it's lubricating all of these components back here, but that's its majority focus. Okay, it does some on the bushings and kind of seals that are in between the drums here, but its primary focus is to be able to lubricate everything back here. All right, you need to get fluid to your rear case bushing and to your tail shaft bushing there for your drive shaft. When you're using the external dump valve, okay, so we'll talk about what they're doing in a turbo car. What they want to do is they want to create this hydraulic leak from the exhausting side of the cooler circuit here to the cooler, okay, creating a hydraulic leak, allowing fluid to not be held in the converter, okay, basically giving you a looser converter, right? So a looser stall converter. If you had a complete circuit, the system, all the resistance as the fluid returns to the transmission is enough to keep the sustained fluid in the converter. Once we create a hydraulic leak, this being the external dump valve, it is now bypassing all that, allowing the converter fluid to free flow out. The converter itself actually does a really good job of throwing fluid out almost one-to-one as it's coming in. So it's actually just a little bit more, allowing it to throw more fluid out than it's taking in. Now that we have a open hydraulic leak and no restriction, it does that much more efficiently. With that, we're now loosening the converter, allowing your turbo car and the engine to get over that threshold, that hump, that load that converter creates, allowing it to spool much faster as you're staging the car. And it actually overall improves the resistance and the breakdown that you trying to get the car up on boost is going to put on your engine and your transmission. So now that's loose, the engine and turbo have less to fight to get right at the target boost. Okay. Typically, once you see a target boost number, you no longer need this external dump valve on your kind of a budget side of it, trying to fix a quick problem with getting over that threshold to get the car to get up on boost. Okay, so it's like a big boat anchor. If you didn't have this, the converter is holding, weighing down that engine and that turbo from getting it to right at the target boost. You could be on the line for like seconds waiting for your car to get up on boost. Okay, so that's what that does. It does help. It is not that efficient in its ability to do that. Okay, you're only talking several hundred RPM. Okay, and as well as it's completely closing off that loop circuit from giving you vital fluid to lubricate everything else downstream. Eventually, it gets to the point where if it's run dry for too long, too much heat, it's going to grab that rear case bushing, lock onto the output shaft, and it's basically going to give you two pieces. At the end of and when you're done with the run, if you do, you're going to have a two-piece transmission case. So something to consider if you have one. Check on your transmission. You don't want to go down that route. It's pretty scary. When you see some of these higher horsepower transmissions, 2,000 horsepower up, 3,500 horsepower, they're using their external dump valves in a completely different way. They're using it after they leave the line, after they launch. What they're using to help get up on boost is what I have here is my spool assist valve. Okay, with my DIY kit and other aftermarket manufacturers. Okay, and there's not that many, but there are actually a lot of professional builders that do this for a lot of LDR Pro Mod cars. Okay, they kind of make their own, but it's not as simple and compact as this. Everybody has their own way of doing it. What they're doing is we're making some modification to the pump. We're in our kit that we offer as a DIY. You'd be doing that, and there's plenty of instruction on that. But what we're doing is we're making some slight modification to the pump. And what we're doing is stopping the conventional or the OEM feed that GM had put into this pump to feed the converter. We're stopping it from that point because we want to be able to control it. All we're doing is moving that ability a little bit farther downstream, just as efficient. So here, okay, and in our kit we have fixture plates and all the instructions, tooling, hardware, everything, gaskets, you name it. Here we're mounting our block and our solenoid right here on the valve body. Okay, and we have different kits for different valve bodies. What we're doing now is we're taking that fluid, diverting it to here, and what we're doing is we're able to control it and then send it right back to the converter. Okay, very similar to how we had it, or how GM intended it to be years and years ago in the 60s and 70s. We're doing it again, but in a completely different way. So controlling it wise here. When we're doing that, okay, and you're on the starting line, and what you're doing is you're staging on the trans brake. You can make this do several different things to control converter feed fluid. What we're doing, we're on the trans brake, we're cutting fluid off, right? Stopping fluid from filling that converter. Okay, we still have our you could still have an external dump. You don't need it on certain things, but you could still have one. So we're not really worried about that. We still have a hydraulic system, even if we're going to have a cooler here. Okay, we're not utilizing the external dump, but you could have this and an external dump system. What we're doing is we're starving fluid from the converter. Okay, effectively we're loosening the converter, giving it a higher stall, less load on the converter that the converter is creating, less load on the engine, getting it up to target boost. This is measurable, but it's far more efficient having the spool assist solenoid here than it is having an external dump valve to control your converter to help loosen it to get up on target boost a whole lot faster. Far more efficient and actually much more friendlier on your entire transmission than an external dump. Yes, it is cutting off fluid, but we're not creating a circuit leak. So we're still holding pressure in these lines, okay, holding pressure in here. If we didn't really have that, there is an issue where we could lose pressure in the circuit. It's just not as efficient having the external itself to control boost, to control converter feed. So here, now we've had that cut off, we get it up to target boost. Now there's different ways you can do this. Like I was saying, you can easily sit there and say your target boost, your launch boost is 10 psi. You can actually, once your ECU sees 5 psi, then this then turns back off, okay, because it's normally open. Normally open being a safe thing to do, because if you have any failure in electronics, and this is a normally closed valve, and then you're going to start your converter and burn it out in a matter of seconds. So now we have a normally open valve. So once the ECU sees the boost you tell it to, it then allows fluid to now continue to flow into your converter, filling it. There's many different ways to do that, but it's far more efficient and safer in your transmission than an external dump valve to create boost, or to help your engine create boost. And again, when you get into the higher level stuff, LDR, Pro Mod stuff and up, what they're doing is, and there's other lower, kind of what I would consider like a lower class of racing that do utilize very expensive transmissions. So when you have those higher ends, what they're doing is they're utilizing this to help spool assist, okay, get up onto their target boost without a whole lot of restriction. And then they're using the external dumps to then help carry it out for the 60 feet, and they can use them all the way out, like I said, a second, up to a second and 200s out. So you're definitely approaching, 150 feet as you get out. You're still utilizing the external dumps. So that those systems can all work together. However, when you get up again to those higher level of transmissions, they actually split the circuits. And when I say that, they're no longer relying on a return circuit here. They still have the exhaust circuit, but this return circuit doesn't exist on these transmissions. What they're doing is they're splitting the circuit, independently sending fluid, line pressure, to the return side of this, giving it its own constant circuit to constantly keep this center line of the transmission lubricated. So there is no concern or issue, because they're relying on these heavily to carry them out, keep the engine RPMs up as they leave, as they launch, to keep the engine, you want the RPMs and the turbos always lit, as efficient as possible through the entire run, and that includes as soon as they knock those beams out and they go. So they're relying on these too much, so you cannot have that circuit interrupted. Way too much horsepower on this transmission to have the centerline loop circuit interrupted. So there are a lot of variables when it comes to these things. But as a DIY person, when you have the external dump to help you on even up to 1500 horsepower, people do utilize this. But I wouldn't prolong utilizing an external dump. You can benefit from the internal far better, because yes, your primary goal is to help spool assist, and that's what this does very effectively. I have professional builders on the East Coast that utilize this, and their numbers are better than they anticipated when they started. They specifically build transmissions for these race teams, so they're dynoing these, and they're getting the feedback from this is better than they anticipated. So we're real happy with the results from our spool assist solenoid here. So you'll kind of look into it, and the cost of this on this basic kit here that we have is $650. And again, you get everything to it. We do have a pro kit, a pro mount kit, which is a little bit different. That's up there about $850. So if you go on denialracing.com, you'll be able to see these, and you'll also see a lot of technical information and support on there to kind of help you understand it better, and possibly, if you'd like to purchase one, make a decision on what you need to purchase and what to look for when you're purchasing other components like a case or a pump. But there is every option to run. If you already have a pump and a case, there are every option out there for you to do that, with plenty of, again, technical information for you to make that decision, and also to make your decision easier. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you understand the differences between this and some of the explanation of what and why and how people are utilizing these components to help them get better numbers, get better 60-foot times, get more longevity out of their components. But this is definitely the ticket for that. All right, that's going to do it for this video. I hope everybody had learned something about the differences between an external dump and an internal spool assist valve. If you head over to denialracing.com, you'll be able to see a lot of good information. There's a technical page there, also the products page that has our internal spool assist solenoids. There's different types. There's this standard kit, which runs you about $650, and we have a Pro kit, which runs you about 850. There's a couple other components there that you can look at. If you have certain pumps, if you have certain cases, not so much cases, but some things do matter. Okay, there is information there. But we offer everything to allow you to, if you already have a certain pump, to be able to purchase the correct amount of products and things you need to install this kit. Again, it is a really good DIY kit. Everything is there instructionally. Please check it out at denalracing.com.